before I'm like, okay, I'm tired of this. Then I'm into
West
it.
Milton is really fun.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. All right, I think we're ready to get started. Everybody would like to take their seats. Everybody on the phone can hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear.
All right, awesome. People are filtering in, so we'll give it just a few more seconds here. All right. Next up, we have our wonderful Connie Matthews. She has 20 plus year in the IT security industry. She is currently the president of the Central Ohio ISSA and co-chair of ISSA International Leadership Board. She is the founding member and board of directors for nonprofit Empower Women of InfoSec. She is the advisor to Tippin University's cybersecurity program, board member for ICMCP, International Consortium of Minority Cybersecurity Professionals, OWASP, and Ohio Cyber Women. She's also a frequent speaker at cybersecurity conferences, an advocate for women in minorities and STEM careers, and also a mentor and coach.
Wow. So as you can tell, I'm crazy because I can never say no. That's my husband says, can you ever say no to anyone? And I say, I'm like, no to you, but no one else. So,
Well, I'm glad you didn't say no today, Connie, because we're happy to have you.
yeah, thank you.
Let you take it
Yeah,
from here.
I'm just, I've always been a huge advocate of like giving back because I've been on the sales and business development side for a long time. And as salespeople, I think we take a lot. So for me, it was important to give back. So that's why I'm involved in so many things. So you're probably going to hear a lot of the same concepts, honestly, that you've heard today, but I'm going to be talking a little bit more from a cybersecurity perspective and what I'm seeing. So we're going to talk about why training is important and ransomware, tabletops, and of course, ever changing. And one of my favorite sayings is security is a journey, not a destination. So has anyone ever heard that before? And I've worked with companies that are like, well, we'll do a pen test, and 20 years later, they haven't done another one, and then they wonder why bad things happen. So it's just one of those things. Next. You can go and go for the next two. Just really quick, my company is really focusing on training and development, and we do professional services. If you have any questions, let me know. We can go in and go to the next one. So overview, why training is important, the tabletops, importance of having and practicing your plan. What is ransomware? I think most of us know what ransomware is, but I'm going to give a couple tips that I think you should think about in consideration. And as a lot of you guys are probably starting to have more conversations with cyber or information security, so these could potentially help those conversations along. Again, another favorite, there is never going to be a silver bullet in cybersecurity. I always tell my clients, if you have a vendor that comes in and says that, you should tell them to leave, because if there was a silver bullet, it would be a multi-billion-dollar industry. Next. Okay, so training your teams. I feel like a lot of executives look at Gartner. So when you look at the top 10 things that people should focus on, number 9, I'm sorry, is workforce competencies and assessment. And really that is assessing your teams and putting together plans to build for success. And just like technology, security changes so quickly, there's no way your teams can keep on top of all of the learning on their own, nor I don't think it's fair to ask people to take their personal time every single year to work on. So training is super important. If you want to learn more, I guess the slides would be available for everybody too. Yep. There's a pretty good article on the Gartner site talking about why this is important. Go ahead and go next. All right. So I like to be interactive, so I'm going to ask you guys a lot of questions. So hopefully you'll play along because it makes it more fun for me to present. So by show of hands, what of the people here, how many of your organizations actually have a training program or set money aside for training? Can you guys just throw out like some amounts that you typically see per year, per person, I should say?
We are opportunistic when we buy technology. We ask for training credits.
Yeah.
For that, so like
It just depends on what the spend is, but typically there's a team associated with it, like if we want, like, some, IBM training or DMC training, we typically ask for like 30 to 40 grand for the team to be able to get training. Now, obviously, most of the virtual now, but like, it's still cheaper. But I don't know that we typically, I would say probably $2,500 per head on the lower end is probably where we're at for example.
And what I think is interesting is, other than me, no one had a number. So I think companies need to do better about showing and telling what those budgets are. The interesting thing with a lot of training, especially on the cybersecurity, information security side, is so much of the new legislation, whether it's the federal CMMC, PCI for credit card, HIPAA trust, they actually call out specific language around training. So for example, I work with a lot of financial and healthcare, and it specifically calls out that all app developers have to have app security training. It's further defining itself by, it used to, like, how many are familiar with the OWASP top 10? So basically what that is the top 10 reasons applications are broken into mobile devices, those types of things. So with a lot of legislation, if you know what the OWASP top 10 is, that's great. But if you don't know how to defend against it, that causes a problem. So we're starting to see a lot of the training tied to regulations, legislative stuff that goes a lot further than just understanding the concepts. And really with training, a lot of the big companies here locally over COVID did some surveys within their employees. And what came back is very clear that a lot of people didn't feel like companies were investing in them. So I can tell you, only in a training company, it's amazing how many calls I get a week working on putting together solutions for training. The other thing is retention. A lot of people have come back and said, if my company invests in me, I'm more likely to stay. By show of hands, if you know your company's investing in you and supporting you in your career, are you more willing to stay? I mean, I know it's an obvious question, but it's just something to think about. You know what I mean?
One of the things I would just say is also structuring it in a way where you track who has what, and then if there's career progression within the company, we're having the same conversation with not folks, and then we have tier 2 and then tier 3 engineers, like give them that growth path, and then start giving them a fellowship hours. That's all.
And I will say, in the cybersecurity space, we've done a horrible job at career pathing for growth. So you're either a practitioner or you're a leader. And also the barrier to entry is really challenging. So one of the things, and I won't go into deep, but I actually partner with a company called Immersive Labs. And it's based on cyber crisis simulation and AppSec and cloud security. And they actually tie back to some different frameworks so you can actually start career pathing with organizations. And it's been really nice because it's really challenging to do that when you have to do it by hand. Like there's a few companies in here today that I've worked with, their security teams, they tried to do it on their own and it was really challenging. So there are I'm not just saying Immersive Labs, there's a ton of other products out there and services that can help you with those types of things. So the other thing, how many of you get involved in the cyber insurance discussions? So what we're starting to see is the rates are going off the charts because let's face it, our insurance companies in the business to pay out claims. No, they want to make money. So I've seen some of my clients have told me their cyber insurance went up 4,000%. See, heard 400%. So they're definitely skyrocketing. So what's coming out of that conversation is they're wanting to know how many people are certified. What does your training programs look like? Because they make the ideal situation to say that if you're training and developing your people, less likeliness for breaches. Doesn't always work that way, but that's kind of what we're seeing.
Just one thing, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
The one thing we're dealing with it right now, there's some companies that are dealing with ransomware. The insurance companies are saying, hey, you had a fiduciary responsibility to do X, Y, and Z. Did you do it? They didn't even know they needed to do those things. So there's like a bunch of gotchas and caveats that every company needs to do to get money from the insurance company.
And then if you've ever read any like insurance claim, what do all of them say? Act of war, act of God, force majeure, they don't cover. Well, if a lot of the phishing and the attacks that you see come from Soviet bloc, North Korea, and China. So unless you have them change that statement, that doesn't, it's not even covered. And there's a lot of talk that ransomware is no longer going to be covered because the likeliness is so high. And I also think when you're doing, training programs, I think it's really important to be creative. Everybody learns differently. Some people learn better on their own. Some people learn better in the classroom. And sometimes it's a hybrid of that. So again, just being creative is super important.
Do we recognize any of the cyber insurance companies, or are they niche kind of players?
There's like 4 or 5 of them. And there are ones that not most people have heard of. And I should know who they are, but right now I'm doing like, do you guys know any of them?
We have some that we thought we figure this out. I'm dealing with our like GC dealing with it all, but yeah, we had to go through and actually get it. And then clients are asking for it as part of in their contracts. So they're trying to make it, MSA is trying to make it our responsibility. So, just because you buy some level of service from us, doesn't mean that we're covering your answer.
I know one of probably the biggest ones is Lloyd of London, which a funny story about Lloyd of London. So Wimbledon actually bought a COVID insurance. So when COVID shut down Wimbledon, I think it was something like $24 million Lloyd's of London had right to Wimbledon because of COVID. So not many people have that insurance, but I just think that's kind of interesting. So again, I'm sure, how many of you have been through awareness training for security? Can you throw out just some solutions? I know at Nationwide, you guys did something a couple of years ago around Game of Thrones. And I still think people talk about that still today. That wasn't me, it was one of my partners that actually did that, but
We have an annual online training.
Yeah, we're new and they're like the 16-bit characters of the Game of Thrones people. So we're evolving
yeah,
the story, but it's still something fun to get everybody excited about.
yeah.
Cybersecurity, all the hygiene things that you need to do and things you need to watch out for, phishing, all that kind of stuff.
And as we know, as October is wrapping up, October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. I really hope that most companies are not just using October. I mean, it really needs to be an ongoing effort. And how many of you set for awareness where they pretty much someone talks from a technology standpoint, or you're not very smart because, oh my God, I didn't know how to set this VPN up, or I didn't know how to set this firewall up. Really, awareness is a behavioral problem. So it's really having and correlating with individuals so they understand what the impacts are. A lot of times when I do awareness training, I talk about people's personal lives and like what they should do with their cell phones, how they should be setting different things up. And when I do that talk, everyone in the room is on their phone changing those settings. So I know speaking to people that is resonating. So making sure you understand how to talk to people that are not technical.
I will say the one session I remember the most from October awareness training is when they brought Frank Abagnale in to speak at Nationwide. They filled the auditorium. There were people overflow. I mean, everybody wanted to hear what he has to say. It was really interesting. I don't even know if he still does that, but
He does. We actually had him in our 10-year anniversary for the COSAC summit that we do here in Columbus, and people were like super, super stoked about it. One of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. I mean, he was a con artist back in the day, but I mean, he's just a really genuine good guy. And have any of you guys heard of Kevin Mitnick? So Kevin Mitnick is probably the most known American hacker. He was probably responsible for the majority of all credit card fraud. Kind of the same thing, like Craig Abigail was before computers, but social engineering. So both of them came to the good side. Like Frank actually created Check 21 and worked with Discover for making the different changes with fraud. So thank God they've come to the good side, but because they were definitely really growing it.
Do you have any data points around liability of the executives at all? Because that typically
Yeah.
gets people.
Yeah, so interesting enough, many of my clients over the years have said, let's do like a 3 and out rule for phishing. And I said, are you prepared to fire your whole executive suite? And when we started showing results, of that, the worst people were executives. They clicked on stuff, did things they shouldn't do. And it's not that they're not smart people, it's just that's not the way they think. And so it's very interesting. So most companies that say we're going to do free and out, they changed it because again, I mean, it's going to be a little challenging if you fire your whole entire C-suite.
I mean, the actual financial liability, it's, I've heard, our CISO tells us that we have to be fiscally and civilly responsible as an officer of a company.
Yeah.
That typically drives investment.
So HIPAA already has that. If you go above gross negligence, you can be personally liable. Some of the new regulations that are out there, they're talking about that, but I don't think there's been a whole lot of movement. Because like I think with HIPAA, if you understand the fines, it's ridiculous. There have been very, very few hospitals that have been fined. There have been some, but it's just one of those things where if you set something down and you don't enforce it, it doesn't really have meaning. So it kind of is to be determined on what that's going to look like. But I do know that right now there's a big conversation with CISOs, which are Chief Information Security Officers. If they're negligent, they can actually be held personally accountable, and their business insurance will not cover it. So now there's a big thing about people having individual insurance on themselves. But that again is with beyond gross negligence. I mean, it's not like if you accidentally make a mistake. So I actually think there is one case right now that they're trying to do that with the CISO. So again, it's kind of to be determined what will happen. And I think, you know, one of the most important thing I think around all of this is everybody should be talking about what we're doing, what's working, what's not working, because none of that's confidential. And if we all talk amongst each other, we can be more successful together. I know in the security industry, I'm one of these people about collaboration, bringing people together. And all of the CISOs in town, for the most part, talk amongst each other. Cincinnati has a group of people that do the same thing, same with Cleveland. But sharing information, what works, what doesn't work is always good. And let's face it, if you're in charge of awareness, at some point you have that where you run out of ideas. So we're actually working on starting an awareness user group here in Columbus that will probably do a hybrid, some people outside of Columbus, but we have a bunch of awareness people from a lot of the big companies that are going to kind of move that forward. Next.
And while you're doing that, Willis Tower, Watson, Towers, Watson.
So technical training, I kind of talked a little bit about this too. Right now, when I talked about the OWASP top 10, until recently, the OWASP top 10, which are the reasons why apps are broken into, has not changed in over 12 years. So from the audience, what do you think that means if it hasn't changed? So honestly,
there's adoption and support either.
yeah, so I think less than 10% of colleges and universities teach students how to write code securely. So that's a problem. All these boot camps about coding, security is like one little talk. And if we think about what we want to protect the most in an organization is either the database level or the application layer. And with the movement of cloud, the cloud is just a huge application. And so these problems are gigantic right now. Finding cloud security people and app security people is almost impossible. I've been working with Nike for several years and they wanted to hire 300 app security people. I'm like, you're not going to be able to find that. So we actually put together a program taking app developers, teaching them security and migrating some of them into the AppSec space and keeping some as champions. So this is why the cloud and app stuff is so important. And again, I mentioned earlier that a lot of the regulations, legislative things that are out there are now requiring all app developers to go through that. Anybody have any questions? I know I'm talking fast, so next slide. All right, so I'm sure you guys have talked about this, but when I meet with leaders in Columbus, we talk a lot about soft skills. And by show of hands, how hard is it to find people that have critical thinking, problem solving, strong communication skills, strong writing skills, teamwork, taking initiative, understanding business? Do you guys find it hard to find people like that?
That's what I was gonna say. With technical stuff.
More technically, the less soft skills that you can have.
It's true. It is, yeah. So one of the things that that what I've been working with on my company is when we teach technical skills, let's say we're teaching someone how to be a filtration tester. Part of that class is at the end, they have to write a report and present to their leadership. So we're trying to force kind of subtly how those skills come into play. And I will argue, like in the cybersecurity space, if you can do the top three, you don't have to be a scientific or mathematical genius. If you can do those three things, you can do really well in cyber. But yeah, it's interesting. Like I feel like the top three are things I hear all the time from people that are hiring. So next slide, please. And again, I just set here, I wanted to provide different resources. So there's a lot of really good resources that are free. Some of them cost money. But if you're talking to someone that is interested on the cybersecurity side, again, there's a ton of stuff out there. If you ever need any references of like things that you can send people to, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to have that conversation. Next slide. All right, so the fun part, this is probably the part you guys will care the most. When we talk about tabletops and crisis simulation, I know we had a few conversations where people are having problems finding budget. Like I mentioned when I introduced myself, I mean, I am blown away at how tabletops have risen in the conversation for executives. I know like Nationwide, Cardinal, I mean, you name the big brands and like they are now doing tabletops with their executives. Because can IT or security write a check for $14 million? So the business has to be part of that conversation. And the technology and security are there to understand what is it going to take from the technology perspective to bring things back up and running. I recently was with one of my clients and they had a third-party managed service vendor, and their CEO asked, how would you handle putting together a DR, disaster business continuity plan? That company didn't even understand the definition of those. And they said they would talk to their IT department on what systems would need to come up. How many, by show of hands, how many people do you think IT people would know what the most critical servers are in the environment? They don't. And at the time I asked the two guys that were in their IT, I said, what would you say? And I go, I'm not trying to be disrespectful to you. They're like, Connie, I have no idea. I then turned to the CEO, and within 20 seconds, he told me the top 4 things that had to be up within an hour, or it'd be critically damaging to their industry, to their business, and how much money they would lose. And so I think technology and security need to be part of that conversation, but we're a resource to the business so they can understand, like, if everything goes down, I don't care who you are, no one's going to get everything up in 24 hours. You have to basically prioritize what's going to go up first. And that can change from week to week. So if Friday's payroll, do you think that's going to be critical? Do you want to deal with 10,000 people not getting paid? Probably not. But if it's 2 weeks from now, payroll may not be the first one to bring back up. And I think, you know, again, I think the guys said a lot about this, but who are your key stakeholders? So by just shouting out, what do you guys think are key stakeholders in figuring out how to do a tabletop? Who would be involved in the company? Like say like legal, marketing, like can you just kind of throw out who you think should be part of those conversations?
Communications, facilities,
And did you say legal?
HR, legal, communications, facilities, IT.
So I don't know if you guys heard, but you know, when you think about like the Target breach, they got a lot of pushback because if you guys remember, their messaging kept changing. But what's hard with privacy breaches is depending on how many people you have in what states, the rules changed with like notification. And so after people criticized Target because it kept changing, but they also have legal obligations to get information out, but then their marketing people weren't always involved in that messaging. And it is all about perception and how you deal with those things. So I think before you can even start anything, you have to identify your key stakeholders.
Are we obligated to now notify the FBI? I just saw from our CISO about that today. I was unaware.
I don't know if it's like official yet, but the federal government is trying to stop any company from paying Bitcoin ransomware. They're trying to make that law. I don't know. Like we were talking back there, like a company like Portland Health, which is a Fortune 20, if they're gonna not be able to work as a company or get up and running, I'm not sure if some federal mandate, they probably would be more. So it's a lot cheaper than the money they lost. But yeah, there is a big push for that. And I will say, you know, if you're a smaller company, they may not send an FBI agent out, but if you're seeing things with ransomware, like I did a talk with a construction association, and construction companies were getting hit really hard with ransomware. And they're too small to have them investigate, but what they do is they track all of those, and then they start sending memos out and notifications to companies to help with what that would look like.
So we received an email from an FBI agent, supposedly FBI agent, we were told, reach out to your local office, they will give you a code. And then you have to reach back out and ask for a code from the whoever sent you that list to get the code.
That sounds like
That
Yeah.
seems a little weird to me.
That's what we just started to.
Yeah, I feel like that might.
That might be helpful to know, like what
Yeah.
the protocol was supposed to be.
And from what I understand, I don't think it's been formalized. I know there's a ton of talk about it.
No. No, it's a phone call.
Yeah, because like nothing can be seen.
Yeah,
Calls or anything
exactly.
like that. And you guys, as I'm talking to you, please, I'm not trying to scare you. I always feel like if you know more, you can make better decisions and you're more informed. So that's kind of really what I'm trying to get across. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, the FBI will actually come to your
Yes.
company for free and do a security
Yeah.
assessment. So they have a formal program, so that is always available.
Yeah, and I will say, if you don't have that contact, the FBI agent, special agent in charge for all of Ohio's headquartered in Cincinnati, his name's Adam Lawton. If you don't have a relationship, I'm happy to do an introduction. He's a super nice guy. Him and I have actually talked on a couple panels together. And really, you know, what is your success criteria? Lessons learned. I think that's probably the part a lot of companies don't do, is when you're in a crisis, the last thing you want to talk about is lessons learned. But once the dust settles, I think it's important to go back and discuss what went well, what didn't go well, and practice the plan. And then again, that will also help you measure how you improve. Next one. So I'm not going to read all this, but by show of hands, does everybody know what ransomware is? So, I mean, obviously, many times you'll be notified that you no longer have access to your information. And then this comes into that business decision. Security or IT may be the first ones that know, maybe not, depending on how things come through. But having a plan, you know, what is the turnaround time? Also working with them, what's the plan? Would you pay it or not pay it? I would say probably in the last year, it's not just about paying the ransom. Sometimes they're selling your information to someone else, so you get multiple people coming at you for money. And I've seen that with some of my clients. Everyone knows what Bitcoin is, right? So most of them will not let you pay anyway but Bitcoin. Does anybody know why? And a lot of people don't realize that, but it is that physical.
I'm probably going to ask probably one of them.
No, there's no dumb questions.
So I don't really understand it at all. I hear about it, but I don't understand it. I don't know Is it real money? Is it fake money? What is it?
It's
I mean,
electronic currency, basically, think of it,
But
and
how do you get it?
you buy it. So it's Coinbase, so it's like, it's all like numbers, so it's a mathematical kind of transaction to some degree. And you know, I have a bunch of friends that invest in it, and you can either make a ton of money or you can lose because it's so all over the place. And I don't know if any of you paid attention on the last 2 years on your tax return, it's actually a question if you have it. Have you guys seen that?
I haven't paid attention.
Yeah, it's
My
like,
cousin has made millions. He's got homes all over the world.
yeah, think of this as like the, you know, the .com bubble where people made a ton of money, then they lost a ton of money. I feel like, I mean, Bitcoin's gonna be around just because, you know, a lot of the transactions, because you can't trace it. And it's a way to hide money, honestly, too. So a lot of illegal activity happens. There's good things that happen too, but a lot's illegal. Where they're, you know, organized crime, that kind of stuff.
With your point around selling of the information, like you can buy it and get your data back, but then you threaten to, or you say, hey, we have our data. You don't threaten to disclose all the personal information of your clients, seen as having a pay.
Yeah. Well, and do you think these people are like good citizens or are they criminals? So you're paying a criminal on the hope that he'll get it back.
Well, a lot of these aren't just single criminals either.
They're
or nations.
organizations,
They're
yeah.
organizations that literally have call centers and
Yeah.
you know, operations.
They're
to
very
run
helpful.
these types of things.
Yeah.
Ransomware is a service.
Yeah.
Is it true that if you pay once, then the chances of them coming back and then encrypting you again to get you to pay another time is greater?
Yeah, and I forget was it the Meet one where the FBI was actually, because they exchanged the keys and plain text, so they were able to get some of the money back. I think it was the JBS, the meat packing, or Colonial Pipeline, because I can't remember which one it was, but yeah, I mean, you just have no guarantee. And I mean, I think I actually had a friend that they got an email saying that they hacked into his phone and found pictures that weren't appropriate, and he called me in a full panic, and I was like, do not do it. Like, I'm like, have they called you back? Because they're very persistent. It's a business, so if they want your money, you're not going to just get one email. Generally speaking, I've never known anyone to do that. So again, there's so much scams out there. It's so hard to tell what's really legit and what's not anymore. Did that help answer your question? Okay, next slide, please. All right. So this is one that I see. I've probably sold thousands of penetration testing to companies globally. I can't tell you how many times when someone leaves a company, they don't deactivate that account. And if that person is a rogue person or someone that wants to do harm, they can do that very quickly. So some of just basic housekeeping is removing old accounts, never share accounts, only give access to people to what you need. So I've worked with companies where everybody has admin access. Can anyone tell me a good reason why everyone needs admin access? I love it that you guys are agreeing with me. This is awesome. But it's amazing how many times that happens. And so when security or IT come to people and say, why do you need that access? It is a fair question to ask. Passwords, I think we're getting close to passwords being completely gone. You're already seeing the big tech companies already starting to move to that. I mean, passwords are so easily guessed and fixed. So I feel like multi-factor authentication, like the bio stuff. I work for a company where you can actually take a piece of tape and baby powder, and you can take someone's fingerprint and be able to replicate that. So it's a lot of them by themselves are not that strong, but when you add multiple things, where so like some of them might be heat activated plus your fingerprint. And so a lot of stuff, again, organized crime is hacking. So if there's a way around it, we're going to figure it out. Also, I think IT and security are getting better, but it's still not good. If you have people reporting things do you think a security IT person or a person that works in a database every day is going to have better understanding of what's not normal? So when someone says, hey, something's not right, we should really listen to them and take into consideration that probably something is wrong. Next slide. Patching. Everybody's familiar with patching. I would say most vulnerabilities that happen, there's normally been a patch out for 4 to 6 months. That's a long time. So it's not that you have to patch things always immediately, but there are some things that you need to do. So how many people have the iPhone? So you guys have probably seen lately, there's been a ton of like emergency patches because of some of the vulnerabilities. You just gotta pay attention, and honestly, like I already have my stuff set up automatically in patches, but big companies may not be able to do that because it would break something. But normally there's a process to patch. Does everybody know that their companies have a patching solution? It's surprising how many people still don't have them. So next slide, please. All right, so tip 3, watch the wire. Obviously, we have a ton of cloud services, website, email. Check your internet provider. Do they provide a firewall to protect your office? With the remote force, a lot of the routers and homes actually do have firewalls. But the problem is the average person at home doesn't know how to set them up. And if they call Time Warner, Nate, Wow, whatever, they don't like dealing with me because they always get a lecture from me because they always tell me to use the default password, which can be looked at by everybody. And that's why home wireless is get hacked in all the time because it's the default password and the password. So with companies, we talked about kind of that resiliency plan, how we went to I've seen a lot of companies actually provide hardware and then they provide support on getting this set up. Again, if you have 10,000 employees, that's a lot of help, but you just have to figure out what's important, what's not.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So, sport tunneling with all these remote workers, will spread out everywhere. If we have an issue where, obviously, sport tunneling allows you to dump normal web traffic or Zoom or whatever Teams direct. But what we're finding is that if you pull everything back to corporate, it's killing latency and whatnot. So now people are starting to say, okay, we're going to split tunneling. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think I've always felt in security, we really need to wrap controls around the data, not people. Because people make mistakes. I mean, I remember I was at an ISSA event, which is all security professionals, and I asked them how many of the companies that you shouldn't have. And they're all like, no. And I'm like, you're all lying. Because I know you have, like we all have. And that's the problem, is it just becomes almost impossible to, to defend, especially if everyone's working remote. Within the 4 walls, you have a lot of controls, but when you take them out, and how many people let their kids go on their phones, their spouses, I mean, it's just, and if it's their hardware, because what happened with COVID, they didn't buy laptops. So if there was a shortage, a lot of companies had people use their personal devices because it didn't work with them. So then how do you dictate to someone who has a personal device? Like we were talking in the back, like there's already been some legal precedent where if it's my phone, I'm not giving full access to my company. That's just me, because if it's my personal stuff, there's stuff that they don't have a business seeing. And there's already been cases where they've lost doing that. I mean, if there's like an investigation, that's one thing, but do any of you feel comfortable like giving your work, your personal phone that has all your personal stuff on? So
Well, they wipe it,
have
they wipe it.
do you,
Yeah, Premier Health has to.
do they provide the device or? do they-
Nope. And we've said, as if in IT, we said, well, give us our own phones like you used to. No, you guys use yours. You want to use your phone, or if you don't want to use your phone, what that means is anytime something happens, you have to run home and get on your laptop.
I mean, people will do it, but I mean, then there's a lot of solutions where you can almost like do containerization on phones so that work can only have access to that container, not the personal stuff. But that, a lot of that technology is a little quirky and it's not always, I mean, like, if we all had Blackberries,
Yeah.
remember there were Blackberry servers, you could wipe everything. Well, good luck with an iPhone, because you can wipe my iPhone and all I have to do is sync up with the cloud because I back up with the cloud and I have everything. But there's things you can, you know, there's controls like with Office 365, if someone stops working, you can turn everything in it. It basically deletes stuff off the phone. I mean, some local stuff can still be there, but next slide, please. All right, so it's amazing to me how many people do not back up their data in real time. This is a big one, whether you pay ransomware or not. If you back up every 30 days, can you live with 30 days of your data being completely gone? Can you live with 1 day? Can you live with whatever days that is? I mean, the same thing it goes with accidents, equipment failure, and of course, yes, ransomware. And we've also seen that backups have been encrypted too. So I joke around, I used to work at the credit union where the president, he used to actually take their backup homes, just home every day and put it in his safe. We probably don't want to, you know, encourage people to do that, but in some ways it wasn't necessarily a horrible idea, but it's not also a good idea. Really taking time to understand your data and how it's protected. Don't let the attacker know more about you than yourself and your data. Next slide. So I know we've talked about this a lot. A little planning goes a long way. Practice, practice, practice. I would honestly say personally and professionally, the last time you want to practice dealing with a crisis is during the crisis. I also have seen where I have a client that has a DRBC, all of resilience, everything, 900-page document. Who's going to look at a 900-page document in the middle of a crisis? Are you going to be able to find what you need? Probably not. So making it actionable and reasonable is super important.
James Clark, BPR.
Yeah. And then really at the end of the day, how long can your business survive without computers and being up? And what are your plans for recovery? So one of my partners at my company, he actually was the first CISO for NASDAQ. And after 9/11, because obviously they're right around there, they all went to the front of the building to see what was going on. Their DRBC plan worked perfectly, but it didn't account that humans would go out and look what happened when they had 4 people killed from debris. So it's like, it's stuff like that you just don't think about, but it's, you know, I mean, and it's like hard to say if A, B happens, C, D, or would A, B, and then Z happen. So having a plan that's workable and being able to adjust is really important too. Next slide. All right, so what do you do if you have ransomware? I have not seen any of the ransomware attacks not be paid by Bitcoin. They don't want checks, they don't want credit cards. Has anyone heard of anyone paying not with Bitcoin? So obviously, I know there are some companies in Columbus that invested in Bitcoin for the purpose of ransomware. So that's now a conversation executives are having, which is it's kind of remarkable. It's interesting. Next slide. And then I just provided some useful links that might be first, like there's resources for small businesses. It's really challenging to build a DRBC resiliency because it's called all different things these days. So I think that sometimes it is important to have third party or an outside person helping you, but you know your data, you know your companies better than anyone else. So it really needs to be a marriage between the two, in my personal opinion. Next slide. Any questions? I think you asked them all because I kept asking you guys questions. So, and then there's this one more slide too that I was gonna. So this is a plug for. So has anyone ever attended the Central Ohio the Sex Summit here in Columbus? A few people. So I'm the crazy person that's run this for 15 years. We are going to be doing a track on resiliency. It's $225 for a 2-day conference. does anybody know who Robert Kuzevac from Shark Tank? He's our keynote, one of our keynotes. But it's a great event. We're looking at 1,500 people in person, 1,500 people virtually. We have a little bit of everything for everyone, from awareness to technical stuff. So thanks, everybody.
And if there's anything CPO can do to help support your event, let us know. We're happy to spam everybody.
Yeah.
As you know.
Social media.
Yeah, I'll send you. I mean, it's, we also have Helen Patton, who was the former assistant for Ohio State, like the Ohio State University. She's not a duo. We have, and I cannot remember her full name, but one, she's the CISO for the United States Air Force. And then a guy named Ted Harrington, who is a very well-known AppSec guy, and he just came out with a book. And we'll probably have about 150 speakers. So all
Awesome.
run by volunteers. So that's why I told you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody else? Thank you.